In a live interview, Sylvester Stallone left the entire studio in shock when he took down a free-spirited talk show host with sharp and direct answers. What seemed like a casual conversation suddenly turned into an intense battle of wits. As Stallone unhesitatingly challenged the host's controversial views, his response not only caught the host off guard but also made the audience rethink their perception of true strength in today's society. Before we dive into today's story, what do you think about this showdown? Is Sylvester Stallone right in pointing out the issues in modern society? Leave your thoughts in the comments below this video. The lights in the studio seemed to pour down like a waterfall, blinding and scorching, thickening the air in the room. But Sylvester Stallone remained unshaken. He sat confidently, relaxed, with his legs comfortably spread, his piercing gaze scanning the space as if waiting for a battle to erupt. Everything in the studio seemed to be gearing up for an important moment. People around sneaked out their phones, eager to capture every second of the conversation about to unfold. They all understood that something significant was about to happen. Sitting across from Stallone was David Johnson, a talk show host known for his sharp remarks and occasional sarcasm. He had interviewed countless celebrities, well-known activists, but had never faced someone like Stallone, a symbol of strength that nothing could shake. "Mr. Stallone," David began, his voice confident and calculated, "you've always been a symbol of strength and decisiveness. But in today's society, do you think that model of masculinity is no longer relevant? Shouldn't we change the way we view strength and toughness?" The audience shifted uneasily, their eyes darting around as if waiting for a reaction. David seemed to have carefully crafted the question to throw Stallone off. But who would have thought that the man in front of him would remain so calm? Stallone simply looked at David, then slowly raised an eyebrow. His expression unchanged. He leaned forward, took a deep breath, and threw a challenging question. "So, do you think I should throw away everything that has made me strong throughout my life?" David smiled smugly. "I'm not denying strength, but I believe its authoritarian nature can cause people to lose their sense of empathy. Shouldn't we stop and recognize that softness, vulnerability, is also part of true strength?" A moment of silence stretched on endlessly. The air seemingly frozen. The audience was tense, with only the sound of a few deep breaths in the background. Stallone scratched his chin lightly and then let out a soft laugh. Not a fake laugh, but a genuine, natural one filled with humor. "Is that so?" Stallone replied, but not in a rush. "You really think that holding on to strength and toughness is wrong?" David adjusted his tie, his gaze now more determined. "I'm not saying it's wrong. But in a changing world, perhaps we need to reconsider. Men don't always have to demonstrate strength through violence or aggression." Stallone locked eyes with David, his face now serious, without a hint of humor. He leaned back in his chair, his hand stretched out as if to feel the pulse of clarity in the air. "Have you ever truly faced danger?" Stallone asked, his voice low and deep, as if the question wasn't meant to be answered but to be tested. "Let's say someone breaks into your house at midnight. Would you want that person to face a strong man protecting you? Or someone who would sit down and talk about their feelings?" The entire studio was stunned. A few people gasped. Others sat silently, looking at each other, waiting for the answer. David, still resolute, opened his mouth, but Stallone didn't give him the chance to respond. "Let me make it clearer for you," Stallone continued, not hurried, but steady. "Strength is not about trying to win at all costs or smashing everything in your way. Strength is when you stand firm even though the world is collapsing around you. Strength is when you protect those you love, when you never give up on the work you've chosen." He paused, locking his gaze onto David, every word seemingly piercing through the other's resolve. "If you think those values are no longer important, then I don't know where you're living, my friend." Stallone's answer not only left David speechless but also made everyone in the studio realize a profound truth. Toughness will never go out of style. It is the foundation of all greatness. David Johnson stared at Sylvester Stallone, his eyes tense but trying to mask his emotions under a calm exterior. In the quiet space, only the sound of the camera and the lights illuminating Stallone's face, highlighting every sharp feature, filled the air. The questions he had prepared seemed to linger in his mind but couldn't find their way out at that moment. After a long pause, David decided to break the silence, speaking up, but his voice betrayed a sense of inquiry. "So, Don't you think Hollywood, and your films in particular, are sending a very clear message? Why always use violence as the only way to solve every problem?" Stallone glanced at David, his eyes cold, as if the question was nothing new. He smiled, his tone unwavering. "Hollywood makes movies. David, we create stories. No one actually beats the enemy in a boxing match or uses a gun to save the world. That's just the script." A few chuckles rang out, not only from David's crew but also from those watching the debate. But David, though slightly unsettled, refused to back down. He was used to guiding the conversation with intellect, and there was no reason to stop now. "True, but those films have a powerful impact on the younger generation," David countered, flipping through his notes quickly, as if they would help him find his next strike. "Kids today grow up with Rambo and Rocky as their idols. Don't you think it's time for Hollywood to create different role models? Heroes who don't solve every problem with fists or weapons?" Stallone didn't rush to answer. He took a deep breath, then spoke casually, as if responding to an easy question. "You know, Rocky is the story of a man who never gives up. A man fighting with himself. And Rambo, he just wants peace, to stay away from all the wars. If they just let him pass without causing trouble, no one would get hurt." A round of applause erupted, strong and full of praise, as if Stallone's words had touched upon an undeniable truth. The audience now saw the story not just as boxing matches or winners and losers but as about deeper values in every tale that Stallone had created. David Johnson felt his blood begin to boil. He couldn't deny that the conversation was slowly drifting off course. He had come here with a clear goal. But now, his questions were being countered with a bluntness he hadn't anticipated. He leaned forward, his gaze locked in Stallone's eyes. His voice no longer held the same confident tone it had earlier. "Look," he began, but this time, his tone was more somber. "Let's look at reality. Think about the society we live in. In this country, people are constantly questioning what it means to be a man. So, what is true strength? Some argue that the kind of strength you talk about, the one that doesn't allow men to show weakness, is actually the root of many conflicts. Do you see it that way?" Stallone didn't rush to respond. He simply closed his eyes, nodding slowly as if pondering every word David had said. After a moment of silence, he placed both hands on the table and looked directly at him. Sharp and resolute. "All right," he said, his voice calm as water. "Have you ever met a firefighter? Or an emergency medical worker struggling in the middle of a firestorm? Or a mother working 2 jobs to make sure her kids have food to eat? Or a soldier fighting in the midst of gunfire to protect the country? Do you think those people lack strength?" David was taken aback by Stallone's questioning. He felt the question strike him like a slap in the face. An awakening he hadn't considered before. Stallone shrugged, a small smile forming at the corner of his mouth. "No, David, the strength of those people is what keeps this society going. Isn't everything protected and built by strong people? The real problem is with those who try to turn strength into something evil." David tried to speak up, but Stallone raised his hand, cutting him off with a look of understanding. "Strength isn't the issue. The problem is with those who live in a safe and comfortable world, built on the sacrifice and strength of others, and then criticize it. Have you ever wondered that if everything collapsed, if all the systems started to break down, who would be the ones to step up and keep order? It would definitely be people like me. People who have sacrificed their whole lives to maintain what you call strength." A heavy breath swept through the room, and the entire space grew so quiet that the beat of David's heart could be heard. All eyes were on him, as if waiting for a response. David felt Stallone's words pierce through his mind, leaving him speechless. "Think about it," Stallone continued, not pausing. "You're sitting here in your sharp suit, looking at me like I'm some relic of the past. But if everything falls apart, what will be left are people like me, the ones who can still stand firm. Still protect what needs protecting." David went silent, unable to counter, only feeling a heavy weight, like an invisible wall pressing down in his chest. The whole room seemed to be waiting for him to respond, but all he could do was remain silent, hearing Stallone's final words echo in his mind. "Well then," Stallone said, his voice slow but firm, "remember one thing. If tomorrow everything turns to chaos, people like me will be the ones helping you survive." The air in the room grew thick. Everyone was quiet, as if the truth had been laid bare. and there was nothing left to do but accept it. David felt his heart race, each beat signaling something about to happen. He was preparing another question, a weapon to regain the upper hand. But when he lifted his head, he realized the situation had changed. The entire room seemed to be enveloped by a new wave of energy. A shift that he could not control. The audience was no longer looking to him. Their gazes were fixed on Stallone, as if waiting for something deeper from him. Stallone stood there, calm, unfazed. He was not in a hurry, showing no signs of losing the upper hand. Every question, every word he spoke was like a punch to David's argument. He wasn't just speaking, he was owning the room. David felt a sense of losing control spread through his body. Everything seemed to slip away from him. Stallone was unshaken. Nothing could stop him. No question could make him back down. And now, the audience wasn't just listening, they seemed to belong to Stallone completely. David tried to keep his composure, closing his eyes, taking a deep breath, then opening his eyes, searching for a response from the crowd. He needed to say something to regain control, but this time, he felt every word he spoke lacked conviction. "I understand your point," David said, his voice now softer, but with an undertone of resolve. "But the issue is, strength doesn't always equate to being right. Don't you think some of your approaches might be stifling societal progress? Don't you think we should change to become more progressive?" Stallone didn't answer immediately. He looked directly at David, his eyes still calm but thoughtful. After a few seconds of silence, he sighed softly and turned to David, his voice now lowering as if he were considering each word he would say. "Have you ever seen a construction project being torn down?" he asked. His gaze fixed on David. Unhurried, David was taken aback. "You mean, a demolition?" "That's right, a construction project. Have you ever witnessed one?" Stallone asked again, never taking his eyes off David. David was slightly confused. "I think so. But..." Stallone nodded as if he had seen the hesitation in David's eyes. "You see, just a few seconds, just one push of a button, and the whole structure will collapse. A career, a future, all gone with one small action, and it crumbles." David stayed silent, listening to Stallone's words as if they were awakening something inside him. But he couldn't yet picture what Stallone was referring to. Stallone continued, his eyes deep as if they held an endless depth. "But have you ever witnessed a construction project being built?" David looked at him, his eyes narrowing as he tried to understand more clearly. Stallone smiled. "It's not something that happens overnight. Years of work, hundreds of hands laboring, working day and night. The workers lay each brick, each beam, not to make it fast, but to ensure that it stands firm forever." A dense silence covered the space. Everyone was quiet, listening intently. "You see," Stallone said, his voice calm but strong. "The people who can destroy a building, they don't care about all that has been built. They just want to see it fall. They don't see the sweat, the sleepless nights, the people who sacrificed to make it." He looked directly at David, each word seeming to drip into David's mind like cold water, forcing him to reconsider everything he had just said. "You talk about change, about moving forward, but sometimes, is that really right? Have you ever asked yourself if this change is destroying the precious things we've built?" David didn't respond. He only felt a strange sensation rising within him, as if some awakening was slowly taking place inside him. The room became still. Every eye was fixed on Stallone, the man who controlled the room, who was posing a question that David couldn't easily answer. David felt his heart pounding as he faced an unexpected challenge. He had prepared all his questions, thinking that the interview with Sylvester Stallone would be an easy game. He thought he could ask some light questions about social issues and then smoothly conclude the conversation. But all he received was unexpected resistance from one of Hollywood's strongest men. Stallone was not one to be swayed by popular opinions, and that made David shift his perspective on this conversation. "Looking at the world today, don't you think we're living in a new era?" David spoke up, his voice slightly more determined. "Now, people aren't just working and getting by. We're facing issues like gender equality, social roles. It's no longer about blind criticism, but thinking about fairness." Stallone paused for a second, then sneered. "Thinking about fairness?" He raised an eyebrow. "Challenging. Or is it about criticizing to make people feel better about themselves?" The auditorium could not sit still. Applause echoed from the audience, but there were also many who appeared surprised. The camera crew exchanged glances. all realizing that this conversation had turned into a real confrontation. David, momentarily taken aback, raised his hand as if to calm the tense atmosphere. "I don't want to stir up more conflict. But you must see that if strength is what matters, why do so many people believe it is outdated? Why do so many no longer believe in it?" Stallone did not answer immediately. He leaned back, his sharp gaze seemingly searching for a reaction. After a moment, he leaned forward, his voice warm but authoritative. "Because those who are not strong enough don't want to face the reality that they can't endure life like this," Stallone said, each word deliberate, as though these words had been forged over decades. The auditorium fell into an eerie silence. A few people stood up, clapping non-stop, while others remained seated, trying to process what had just happened. David wanted to respond, but Stallone's words kept echoing in his mind. He quietly lowered his head, unsure of what to say next. But Stallone didn't stop. He continued, his voice now soft yet firm. "Life will not ask you whether you want to endure or not. It will simply challenge you. When you fall, you won't receive sympathy. There will only be one question: can you get back up?" David couldn't find a reply. He looked around at the eyes of the people. Not just the audience but his own as well. Everything had changed, and he realized he was no longer just the interviewer. It was he who had learned the most important lesson. When the last lights on stage went out, David managed to force a faint smile, trying to appear calm in front of the cameras. But Sylvester Stallone showed no sign of hesitation. He stood up, stretched comfortably, and waved gently to the crowd before leaving the stage, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Behind the scenes, the tension began to rise. The producers rushed to check the equipment. David's earpiece crackled with urgent voices. "Everything's gone off track. Social media has started to explode. We need to cut the controversial segments before we post." But before anything could be controlled, someone in the audience quickly uploaded the clip online. A media storm immediately erupted. Stallone attacks the host. Sylvester Stallone teaches the media a lesson. Why we still need men like Stallone. Videos were cut, slowed down, and given dramatic background music, spreading rapidly across Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, with every passing second attracting millions of viewers. Within hours, the video dominated the trending charts. Comments on the platforms became a real battleground. "I'm not a Stallone fan. But this is incredible. He said what everyone thinks but dares not admit. Watch how he controls the host, the pinnacle of legend." But soon after, a backlash emerged. An old star still stuck in outdated ideas. Toxic masculinity, right? Can we stop pretending he's a thinker? David's network quickly sent out a statement trying to minimize the damage. They issued a polished statement saying that all viewpoints should be respected and discussed. As for David, he didn't let it slide. On Twitter, he wrote, "Debate is necessary. I respect Mr. Stallone's point of view. Though I disagree, let's keep the conversation civil." But no one paid attention. The online community had decided who the winner was. Meanwhile, Sylvester Stallone didn't care about the controversy. No tweets, no press releases. He just continued his life lightly, without a worry, because, for him, unlike those still arguing in the comments, he didn't need to prove anything. When the noise and controversy finally died down, one big question began to emerge. Was this just a hot moment on social media? Or had Sylvester Stallone sparked a deeper issue about the role of the media in this era? Although everything gradually calmed down, his video still refused to fade away. It was shared from every corner of TV shows, podcasts, to serious news reports, continuously analyzed down to the last detail. Some saw it as a wake-up call, while others claimed it was just a game for attention. But one thing could not be denied. People were not just talking about Stallone. They were discussing something bigger. A group of viewers believed Stallone had pointed out the hypocrisy in how modern media operates. They criticized hosts like David, who always tried to create a message but became flustered and confused when faced with rebuttal. They expected celebrities to just follow the mainstream ideas. But the moment someone dared to think differently, the control started to collapse. On the other hand, critics of Stallone argued that he was just a rich old star living in a world detached from reality. Caught up in outdated ideals. Talking about strength while living in a mansion is easy. They said. However, something unexpected happened. People who truly understood resilience in real life began to speak out. A post from a Navy veteran, with emotionally charged words, quickly spread across social media. Stallone understands true strength. Strength is not about imposing or belittling others, but standing firm when life pushes you down. We need more people like him. A single mother from Oklahoma also shared a video. I have to raise 3 kids on my own. If I'm not strong, they'll have nothing to eat. Don't tell me that strength is evil. Even an elderly man stood at a gas station, watching the interview on his phone, shaking his head. These kids don't know what real struggle is. They think life is just pointless arguments on TV. Stallone gets what real life is all about. Meanwhile, David remained silent, although his media network tried to shift the topic with new stories. No one cared. Every attempt he made was met with a simple yet challenging question. Why does a Hollywood star have more insight than a professional journalist? And this is where the real conversation began. Not about Stallone, not about the debate, but about a bigger issue. Are we living in a weak society? Are people so afraid of true strength that they refuse to admit it might be necessary? Is the media just trying to control? Or are they truly shaping culture? These discussions were no longer just fleeting arguments on the internet. They became serious conversations at dinner tables. People weren't just watching anymore, they started questioning themselves. And through all the noise, Stallone remained silent. A week after the event that sparked the public uproar, Sylvester Stallone didn't choose to make a public statement or post a message on social media. Instead, he went to a small gym in Greenwood, California, where he trains every day, and joined in a casual conversation with a reporter there. A local reporter didn't hesitate to ask about Stallone's controversial moment, hoping to get an apology or explanation from him. But instead of a harsh reaction or a lengthy explanation, Stallone simply shrugged, took a sip of water, and replied calmly, "I have nothing to apologize for. I just said what I felt." The reporter pressed on. "Were you surprised by the strong reaction from people?" Stallone chuckled softly, his eyes calm. "I've lived long enough to know that whenever someone tells the truth, the world will be shocked. That's normal today." His words were simple, straightforward, but left a deeper impression than any grand statement. No need for loud slogans. Just a man being honest about his views. However, this didn't end with a simple interview. The consequences of Stallone's words began to spread. David Johnson's show on Metro Television started losing its stable audience, and he gradually faded behind the scenes into less watched segments. Though not yet cancelled, his name no longer shone as brightly as before. As for Stallone, the change didn't come from media campaigns or direct reactions, but from the people who were beginning to rediscover themselves through his words. Soon after, clips of Stallone from his old movies began to be widely shared. The speeches of his character, Rocky Balboa, such as the famous line, "Strength is not about how hard you can hit, but how many hits you can take and keep moving forward," were quoted in conversations about fighting spirit and perseverance. His words became a new source of inspiration, awakening the will and resilience in everyone. And it didn't stop at social media. In real life, changes began to be felt clearly. At training centers, young people no longer just came to build muscle, but also to learn how to be resilient in overcoming difficulties. Parents started focusing on teaching discipline to their children rather than just thinking about their rights. Workers no longer complained about job pressures but instead faced challenges with stronger mental strength. None of this was directed by anyone, but it was the awakening of those who realized the difference between true strength and weakness in moments of challenge. Ultimately, this story was not just about a controversial interview between Stallone and David Johnson. It was a reminder of a world where true strength had been forgotten. And one man helped others realize that strength is not just about throwing punches or winning, but about the ability to stand firm when facing difficulties. So, you, reading this, ask yourself, what is true strength? Is it weakness when facing difficulties? Or is it the ability to not fall when challenges arise? Because strength is not just muscle, but the character you show when no one is watching. The story of Sylvester Stallone and the impact of his straightforward words is not only a lesson about strength but also a reminder of the value of honesty and resilience in life. Sometimes, strength is not something that can be measured by muscles or achievements, but it is the ability to stand firm and keep moving forward, no matter how tough the challenges may be. This story hopes to awaken in you the inner strength to face any challenges in life. If you find this story meaningful and want to continue following other exciting content, don't forget to click the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss any videos. Share the video with your friends and family to spread these positive messages together. Note: this is a fictional story, intended for entertainment and to convey meaningful messages. Any similarity to real events or individuals is purely coincidental. This video is not intended to affect any individual or organization. Legal responsibility is hereby disclaimed.